CAR Principle 6 states the following: the American ideal is a diverse and pluralistic nation of free people who come together as one nation under God. The model we seek to achieve is of one nation bound together by the common recognition of first principles and a consensus on core values. When one first sets foot in America, the diversity of the American people is immediately apparent. In most nations, still to this day, the national identity bears certain exclusive perceivable traits. For example, the people of China, Colombia, or of Ghana all bear distinctive outward features that characterize their specific national identities. Coming to America, however, one is immediately made aware of the wide spectrum of ethnic, racial, and cultural appearances. To be an American, therefore, pertains to something other than homogeny of outward appearance. American identity is established by the acceptance and practice of shared principles and values. America is about an idea, more specifically, a dream. It could be said that human history has been characterized by the constant violent competition between separate peoples, each affixed upon a specific identity, an exclusive cultural myth that revealed how their people came to be. The world was comprised of these separated people, each claiming their own heritage and rights, assured of the nobleness of their cause as they sought to advance their own people above all others. Conflict was inevitable. However, with the historical rise of the Abrahamic faiths, a radical new perspective of human origin emerged. Rather than perceiving all people, cultures, and races as having a separate origin, the Abrahamic faith perspective introduced the notion that all humanity had originated from one source, one location and time, and all had come from a single ancestor. Although revealed by religious means and embraced as an article of faith, in fact, modern genetic research, through the backtracing of genetic markers within DNA, confirms that we do share a common ancestor. We are one family, and thus we share the same essence and are of equal value. This conclusion stood in stark contrast to virtually every cultural heritage. Nearly all contained a narrative claiming exclusivity and a central significance for its own people and territory. The increased spread of the Abrahamic perspective presented a unique challenge to this common misperception. It rejected the view that racial, ethnic, and cultural differences were evidence of a disengaged, unrelated humanity that often was the catalyst to conflict. It instead asserted that the diversity of humanity was actually the unique expressions of a common human essence. Thus, this perception challenged everyone to the core of their regional cultural heritages. It is why when many missionaries and religious pioneers shared this good news, they were often persecuted and even killed. In fact, the aforementioned discoveries of genetic science have also shown us that different racial features were nothing more than a peripheral natural bodily adaptation related to processing the intake of vitamin D while regulating the amount of potentially damaging UV light from the sun. Thus, in a very real sense, we are one family under the same God, and the global space in which we live should be shared between us in equitable fashion. Rather than dividing up finite territories that define the battleground of competing interests, The earth was to be our common home. This viewpoint, rooted in faith, holds out the promise of a common destiny for all humanity, that one day a better world would be realized, and it would be one that would reflect the Creator's highest ideals and aspirations, rather than the self-interest of one faction over another. This vision is the root of the American dream of one nation under God, and was to bring forth the foundational values and first principles around which all Americans would be defined. In 18th century America, in regards to race and culture, the colonists, although exposed to those high moral imperatives of the sacred tenets of their faith, had not yet fully embraced its social implications, and instead they clung to the old world ways of exclusivity, of my group over all others. As mostly Caucasian descendants from England with a decidedly British mindset, it was still the norm that their racial status would provide them with a privileged class advantage. This mindset destroyed any hope for a long-term understanding and cooperation between the new white settlers from England and the existing Native American population. The bright hope displayed in the timely appearance of Samoset and Squanto, who welcomed and guided the first settlers and were integral to the first Thanksgiving shared with the Wampanoag tribes, was soon dashed. The norm of the old world ways would still hold fast, as was tragically demonstrated years later in the shameful Trail of Tears. Also, sadly, beginning with the Jamestown settlement, it was the old world provincial thinking that allowed the settlers to embrace slavery and resist the trends that sought to expose its immorality. In the area of religious practice, the Old World territorial ways were also manifested, as 8 of the 13 colonies established official religions, and to varying degrees, religious bigotry and persecution of other faiths was common throughout the colonies. Given all these sad circumstances, the ideal of one nation under God was inconceivable. At the same time, there was a powerful work of divine providence that pointed the colonists to higher ideals and better ways. One manifestation of that providence was the First Great Awakening. It was an influential wave of religious revival that swept the colonies in the mid-1730s. It was the first time that slavery had been publicly portrayed as a moral evil. Great evangelists such as George Whitefield openly proclaimed that faith in Christ also required one to change their ways. It was also the first time that black slaves were welcomed to worship together with whites. Although incomplete in outcome and in need of a future Second Great Awakening to begin the abolition movement that would end slavery, it did at least plant a seed that reminded the people that one could not be a Christian and enslave his fellow man. America was to be something more, and not just an extension of the old world. It was to be a new world with new ways. This period of religious revival also helped to lay the foundation for the notion that all were created equal, and it would have a considerable influence on the founders and their views on natural rights. As the tyranny of Britain over the colonies intensified, likewise the desire intensified to define, design, and then implement just governance that would secure the natural rights for all. It gave rise to the Declaration of Independence that fomented the Revolutionary War and gave birth to the United States. With the founding of America, the divine providence was opening the door toward the destiny of one nation under God. The outbreak of the Revolutionary War and the forming of the Continental Army was another significant step toward the dream. For the first time, individuals, both black and white, Catholic, Protestant, and Jew, marched and fought and died under the same banner for the same cause, protected by the one hand of divine providence. Nearly a fourth of Washington's army was comprised of African American soldiers who had been promised freedom if they would join the Continental Army and fight for their new nation. But the first of many promissory notes from the Bank of Justice would be returned to them marked with insufficient funds. In order to procure the support of the Southern colonies for the new Constitution, the Constitutional Convention avoided definitive articles to end slavery, only agreeing that the slave trade would soon come to an end within 20 years in 1808. The Constitution of the United States had been ratified. However, the founding of the nation would not be completed until all Americans could stand together as one nation. The seeds of disconnect at the founding of the United States gave impetus to the rise of the Second Great Awakening, which sought to right the social wrongs and transform America into a moral and ethical nation that would be pleasing to God. African Americans had embraced Christianity in the First Great Awakening. Now, 100 years later, would be on the leading edge of the Second Great Awakening with the rise of the Black Church and the abolition movement and the birth of new Christian denominations. All were inspired to see the building of a new America. One of the most prominent figures of the abolition movement was Frederick Douglass. He had escaped from slavery in 1838 after a harsh life of servitude in Maryland. He was later hired by William Lloyd Garrison as a speaker for the Anti-Slavery Society. He founded and edited the North Star, an abolitionist newspaper. On July 5, 1852, Douglass gave a most memorable and important speech entitled, "What to a Slave is the 4th of July?" In that speech he said, "I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America." Douglass saw the Civil War as a struggle between freedom and slavery. For him, the sin of slavery could only be ended if blacks could take their place as citizens and equals. He was the driving force behind President Lincoln's issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation. Douglass was also instrumental in the recruitment of thousands of slaves and free black men to join the Union Army and fight for the cause of freedom. Douglass's own 2 sons were among the first to enter the service of their country. African Americans, as they had in the Revolutionary War and in every war since, fought and died by the thousands to preserve freedom for all Americans. But once again, for them, the Bank of Justice was closed. Although the sin of slavery had finally been purged from the land, the old world mindset still remained, and basic civil rights were withheld from African Americans. Most white Americans could not envision equal status for blacks. Many, including Lincoln himself, thought it best that America's black population be returned to Africa. America was a whites-only nation. They never considered that African Americans, having shed their blood through the undeserved suffering of slavery, as well as having fought and died in two great wars for freedom, might have a legitimate claim on the American dream. However, instead of the joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity, an era of Jim Crow and segregation was foisted upon them for the next 100 years. Who would free America so that the dream of one nation under God could be redeemed? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of that dream on August 28, 1963, when he stood before the nation with the zeal of a prophet of old, seeking to complete the founding of America. Up to that moment, our long history had been soaked in the blood of many conflicts arising from false visions and immoral divisions under wrong-headed social, religious, and political motives. All families within our nation had suffered the immeasurable pain of postponed liberty and buried dreams. We will create a final bitter legacy for our posterity if we continue to delay America's true destiny, the one for all Americans, the one for which America was founded. Now, 50 years later, the time has come once again to reclaim the dream of our forebears. Our nation was meant for the hope of e pluribus unum, yet stands today as a house divided. Even so, it remains our faith that these dividing walls will come down today. And with this faith, we will be able to transform the still jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of one nation under God. Therefore, we will work together to fulfill this vision of the completion of America's founding, realizing together the historical good contained within our founding ideals and vision. For this reason, we affirm CAR Core Principle number 6. The American ideal is a diverse and pluralistic nation of free people who come together as one nation under God. The model we seek to achieve is of one nation bound together by the common recognition of first principles and consensus on core values. I hope that this presentation will inspire a fruitful discussion. Have a great meeting and a great day.